Hi, welcome back to Courageous Journeys. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today, I'm going to talk about something that I saw on social media. One of the things that I tend to do pretty automatically is I will see something and immediately connect to a deeper potential meaning about it. And I know a lot of you do this too, but now it used to be about me and what I would interpret it as and how it impacted me, though most of the time I wasn't aware. And that's why this is so important. Now, when I do that, I will see something in a movie that's reinforcing a stereotype and interpret that and think about what impact is that having on a survivor, for example, or a woman or a person of color or a kid, whatever. And I often think about it in terms of what is the meaning that somebody is taking from this, right? Because no matter what our core beliefs are, we're taking meaning, we're making meaning out of everything. And most of the time, we're not aware that we're doing it, and that's why it has such an impact. So, like a lot of things that I see on social media that are meant to be positive and inspiring and all of that, this just kind of hit me wrong in general. So aside from the deeper meaning, it initially just kind of hit me wrong. And then I thought about, wait a second, this is really sending a deep message to people that I think is really kind of unhealthy. So the meme was shared actually by an organization that has a huge following, and they were sharing something, I think, from someplace else, and it was related to the law of attraction. And it was saying, instead of apologizing, so basically, don't apologize for being late, thank the person for waiting. Focus on the positive, not the negative. And of course, with law of attraction, it's all about the energy that you put out there and that sort of thing. And I've talked about some issues that I have with the whole thinking positive thing. But this I felt was really problematic for a couple of different reasons. And so the idea is that when you apologize for being late, that's negative. And thanking the person for waiting is positive. Okay, I agree that thanking the person for waiting is positive. But apologizing for being late isn't negative. In fact, it can be an incredibly positive energy when done without shame. And that's the really difficult part. Because for many people, apologizing makes us feel like we've done something wrong. It makes us feel bad about ourselves. It perpetuates the cycle that we can be in where we apologize for everything. When somebody bumps into us, we have just become somebody who apologizes for absolutely everything that really has nothing to do with us much of the time, or doesn't necessarily require an apology. So when we go to that place, that is kind of a negative energy, right? But it's not the apology that's the problem. It's the wound that's associated with that shame that is a problem. The cure or the antidote to that shame is not to not apologize. The antidote or the cure to that shame is healing whatever it is that creates that shame. So the message that apologizing is negative, or that you don't apologize for being late specifically, and that's what this was about. It was literally, don't apologize for being late. The problem with that is that there are times when an apology is healthy and appropriate and important in a relationship, whether it's a stranger or a partner or a child or a family member, a coworker, whoever. There are times that an apology is really important for us as the person apologizing and for the person receiving that apology. It's so important, and to suggest that that's negative and we don't do that, well, from a mental health perspective, that's just wrong. But again, the important thing is that we apologize from a place that is grounded in worthiness, so that we don't go to that place of shame. When we avoid apologizing for being late, that's not avoiding negativity. In a sense, it's gaslighting. That's something in a way that people would do who are narcissistic. And I don't use that label lightly. I think it's thrown around way too much and not appropriately. But somebody who never apologizes for something, that's not healthy. That's not a healthy way to show up in the world. So that's, I think, really problematic. And the message that sends then is to avoid that feeling is somehow wrong. But what that ultimately does is encourages people to not accept responsibility and to avoid dealing with that shame or guilt that comes up, instead of actually healing what it is that creates that shame in the first place. So I think that's incredibly problematic. The other part of that is when you're on the receiving end of it, so somebody's 10 minutes late and they don't apologize for being late and they just say, thank you for waiting. They're not owning their part in that. They're not accepting responsibility for that. And as I said a few moments ago, it's in a sense a form of gaslighting, because you're not acknowledging your error. And being late, in this particular example, being late is an error. Now, the person you're meeting may not care. It may be a habit for you. It may be a struggle for you to be on time to things. But if you say that you're going to be somewhere and you're not there when you're supposed to be there, when you say that you're going to be there, that's an error. Just as if we say, I will babysit for you, and then you don't babysit. You don't show up to babysit, or you don't show up on time. That's an error on your part. If we say we're going to do something and we don't do it, or we don't do it when we say we're going to do it, that's an error, correct? Like if you've got something that's due at work and it doesn't get done on time, that's an error. You may have a very valid reason, but that doesn't change the fact that you've made that error. And when we make an error, when we make a mistake, the healthy, appropriate thing to do is to apologize. So when you're on the receiving end and somebody isn't apologizing, and it could be being late, it could be forgetting something that they said that they were going to do. When you're on the receiving end of that and there is no acknowledgement of that, then there's no repair that happens. There's no accepting and acknowledging that. And one of the things that is really kind of perpetuates a damage that has already been done is when there's no acknowledgement of it for this person over here who's waited for you, for example, this person over here never really gets an acknowledgement that this is something maybe you can work on, that this is just something that they have to continue to be thanked for as time goes on. And if you're watching this video, there's a really good chance that you're the one on the receiving end quite often. My guess is if you're watching this video right now, you likely apologize for things that are not healthy to apologize for. But you're likely on this receiving end. And sometimes it is something relatively benign. But the problem is when we get accustomed to this, when we tell people in vast ways to no longer apologize for this, to just thank this person, then that really continues to perpetuate this idea that people don't need to apologize, that we just go on as if nothing has happened. And that's not healthy. It doesn't feel good when, using this particular example, when you think about somebody else's time, especially when the time that you have together is very limited, and you reschedule things or you get up early or whatever it is, you do what you need to do to get there on time, and this person is late. What does that leave you with? Well, on a subconscious or unconscious level, that doesn't have value. Therefore, you don't have as much value. And of course, that's not true, but that's a reinforcement of that. And again, it could be something totally unrelated to being late. It could be hurting your feelings. And this goes along with the idea, and again, in a lot of these things, there's aspects of it that are important and helpful and valuable in a lot of ways. But it's kind of similar to the idea of how people will often say, your opinion of me, or I don't remember exactly how it's said, but basically, your opinion of me is none of my business, or something along that line. Like, what you think about me is none of my business. And again, on the surface, that's kind of a helpful thing to consider, right? Because we put way too much emphasis and worry into what everybody is thinking about us. That's not healthy. But the answer is not to immediately, all the time, say, well, what you think or how you feel about me doesn't matter. Well, when we're building relationships with people, it kind of does matter, doesn't it? Particularly if they're upset with you about something, or they feel like you're not necessarily honest. That matters, doesn't it? Now, there's kind of a line there that we need to be careful about, because we don't want to put a lot of weight. We don't want to put our sense of self or self-worth into what other people think about us. But to suggest, it's kind of like an all or nothing thing when that suggestion is put out there. And we hear that, and I've heard so many people in the entrepreneurial space kind of talk about that. Well, they're just jealous of me, or their opinion has no bearing on who I am. And that's true. Absolutely, that's true that it has no bearing on who somebody is. But it's become this way to deflect sometimes things that are helpful for us to consider. So one of the things that I think is important in that particular regard is consider the source. So if somebody is speaking negatively about you out in public and stuff like that, consider the source. Consider the avenue that it's happening in. But again, this is more about how I think we, and we do this historically, how we kind of go from one extreme to another. The pendulum swings kind of back and forth to extremes. We have difficulty finding a middle ground. And we have, I think, become, and I think part of this is related to social media and life coaching, because so many more people are talking about mental health, and that's good. But a lot of people talking about mental health from an expert standpoint as a coach or a guru or whatever, they don't necessarily understand fully everything that they're talking about. Now, of course, some people do. I don't want to suggest that they don't, but I think it's this, everything has kind of come together to create this landscape where people can easily create a meme and it goes out and it can go viral because we want to resonate with that, right? We want to take that in and say, yes, I don't have to feel bad about being late. That's not helpful. That's unhealthy. That's going to drain my energy. It's going to create negative things in my life. Like, that kind of feels good to think about, right? Especially if why we feel that shame in the first place is hidden. We don't really understand it, or we haven't done any work to heal it yet. The idea of being able to say, yes, I don't have to apologize for being late anymore. That always makes me feel so bad, and I don't have to feel bad about it anymore. Like, that's where a lot of people are going to go with that message. But again, that can create actually more problems. And to suggest that we no longer apologize for being late, and I think late is different than some other things. Like if somebody bumps into you, yes, and you apologize, yes, we need to work on not apologizing for that because you've not done anything wrong. It wasn't an error on your part. It's not like you weren't the one or you were the one not watching where you were going. Somebody else was not watching where they were going. So in that situation, absolutely, there is nothing to apologize for. And of course, there are other situations as well. But there are times that apologizing is important and healthy and appropriate. And I think generally, in fact, I can't think of a circumstance where it wouldn't be the case. Being late is actually something to apologize for. It absolutely is. And so I found that particular suggestion or that example just not helpful. I don't know what example they might have been able to give, but that I don't think was a very good one. And again, it's not all or nothing, right? And this is the challenge, and this is why I wanted to talk about it, because we don't want to go from being somebody who apologizes for everything and feels shame about it, even when it's not something that they need to apologize for. That's not healthy. Feeling shame around anything is never a healthy thing. So moving away from that, absolutely we need to work on that. But we don't want to swing so far over here that we never accept responsibility for something because it feels shameful. That we never deal with anything because it's negative. That is absolutely not the answer. And again, when you're on the receiving end, that can end up reinforcing so many of the things that we're already trying to let go of. Those core beliefs, that feeling of responsibility. And one of the things that does too is, so if you're waiting for somebody, one of the things that does too, when somebody doesn't acknowledge that they were sorry or that they were late, doesn't apologize for that, and just thanks you for waiting, it's a suggestion on a subconscious level that you have a responsibility to wait. And potentially even, and this is going to affect people differently, but the majority of people, it's also going to send a message that not only should you wait, but if you feel anything about waiting, then there's something not right with you. Then you're not in this positive space. If you feel frustrated, if you feel stressed or annoyed or whatever you might feel when the person is late and particularly when they don't acknowledge it, because that's likely going to create some feeling too, that isn't really okay either, that you should just feel good and feel light and positive because this person thanked you. Acknowledging how you feel, though, is important. It's one of the things that I talk about all the time. Even if it's an overreaction to something, acknowledging how you're feeling about it is important. And that message can easily leave somebody with the idea that, oh, well, they've thanked me for waiting, so therefore I shouldn't feel whatever it is I'm feeling. I shouldn't feel devalued, or I shouldn't feel disrespected because this person was late and is thanking me for waiting. Absolutely not. And if you pay attention, you'll probably recognize a lot of things out there that suggest that. Another example, and this was months ago, and I think it was a personal post that somebody created about not apologizing any longer because they're depressed and sometimes they have to cancel last minute or something along that line. Well, we don't want to blame somebody or judge somebody for being depressed and needing to cancel, but to suggest to not apologize for not showing up or to not apologize for canceling last minute, probably not the best answer. Not the best answer, because what's going to happen is you're going to still feel bad. You're going to still commit to things that you may not want to commit to, or there's a good chance you're not going to be able to follow through on, and you keep feeling bad. You keep feeling like you're letting people down. And in all reality, when we're in a relationship with somebody, no matter who that person is, when we commit to something and then cancel or don't follow through, what damage does that do to the relationship? It's going to create problems. So the answer isn't to not apologize. The answer is work on being able to set boundaries for yourself where you don't commit to a lot of things. If you know that you are really depressed and there's a good chance that you're not going to go to a get together or contact somebody when you say that you're going to contact them, then the work is learning to set that boundary within yourself. And of course, there's some healing that needs to happen in that. But the answer isn't to not apologize for not doing it. It's don't commit to doing it in the first place. And that's a whole other kind of complex topic. So there's no judgment about that, because that's not easy to do. We commit to things, we overcommit to things, even when we're not depressed, because we feel bad, we feel guilty, we feel obligated, we feel responsible. But again, the answer isn't to not apologize or to not take responsibility. The answer is not being in a position, doing the work that we need to do to not be in that position to where we cancel all the time. And that's not easy to do. People are going to try to talk you into things. So like in this example of depressed, somebody being depressed, there's a good chance that somebody will say, oh, just come on, you should come, you'll feel better. But for you, you have the responsibility to yourself. So this isn't about somebody else, but you have the responsibility to yourself to be able to learn to honor what you know to be real and true for you. And if committing to doing something or going somewhere isn't what you want to do, the answer isn't to commit to it, not do it, and not apologize. The answer is doing the healing work that you need to do so that you can be in a position where you don't commit to things, where you can say no. where you can say, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And that's a whole big boundary conversation. And again, healing, there's some healing that needs to happen in that, but part of that happens through practicing. So thank you for watching today. If you can relate to any of this, share in the comments on either end, on either side of that, over here or over here. I would love to hear from you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. It helps other people find this video too. So thanks for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.